All right. I think we're going to jump in here. I'm seeing attendees trickle in here in the background. Hopefully, folks can hear me. Actually, if one of my presenters, could you give me a thumbs up to be sure my audio is coming across? Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining. Welcome to the webinar entitled Mapping Out Your Data Journey to Drive Business Outcomes. This is a part of the SSB webinar series. So whether you're joining us for the very first time or you've come to some of our other sessions, thanks for being here. I'll be your host today from SSB. My name's Wade Longmire, and we have a great conversation set up for you, and I'm joined by three of the best from sports and events. I think we want to start in general just by wishing everybody the best in the world of COVID-19, right? I think I speak for all of us, whether we're in education or professional sports entertainment, when I say it's good to see at least some positive momentum as we look to the fall and we look to events and campuses and getting back in public. I know I also share with all of you the hope that that optimism continues both as safely and as successfully as possible as we get there. Obviously, many miles to go. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we dive in. Number one, just so that you all know a structure of this conversation and where we're going, we've broken down three phases of a conversation today with our panelists. So we'll first start with kind of an introduction and a high level on data in general, how it looks for their organizations, what they do with it on a day-to-day basis. The second phase of our conversation will be a bit more specific, right? So I'll ask these folks to share some of the benefits and challenges they've seen in their journey, how they're using data in their org, and some specific examples with that, just so that we don't stay too high level for the entire conversation. And then the third phase, we'll wrap with sort of an advice session, right? I think all of us would love to hear lessons learned, advice they would give to somebody. I know I speak for the panelists, and I'm sure a lot of you when I say that we're all at very different stages of this data journey, whether we're crawling, walking, running, somewhere in between. So any kind of that best practice sharing that we can glean, we're going to go for it. And that's a point too where we're going to get questions from you all, hopefully, and keep the conversation rolling. Other housekeeping item, in terms of audience interaction, two avenues for you. Number one, we are going to do a poll, right? So at some point there will be a pop-up that hits your screen. Your pop-up blocker has not broken down. We are trying to get some feedback from you to influence our discussion and some of the questions we ask, and just get a sense of where we are as an audience so that our panelists can speak appropriately. Second, we would welcome questions, right? So hopefully at the bottom of your Zoom bar, you see a Q&A piece. Please feel free to submit a question. I'll be monitoring those. I'd love to get as many as I can into the conversation so we can make sure we're speaking to topics that are valuable and that people want to discuss. So with that, again, thanks for being here, and we'll dive into today's topic. I think high level, this is a conversation we all know is going on at every campus, team, event organization in the country, right? Not many of us would disagree with the idea that data is the future of our businesses, but there's a lot of questions with that, right? What does it look like for my organization? How do you overcome this challenge? When you talk about the specifics of tech or leadership or my industry, what does it look like? So that's why I am joined by three of the best from sports and events. I'll ask my panelists to introduce themselves, both their role and the organization with which they represent, and maybe as a high level question for you guys to start, why would you say data is important, right, as we jump into this conversation? Michael, just because you're the square next to me, I don't know if you want to start with that.
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Ferris, and I'm with the Country Music Association. Today would have been our first day for the CMA Fest here in Nashville, so throwing up a celebration for that today in my wardrobe. At CMA, I work within our Strategic Initiatives Department as our business intelligence lead, getting to oversee the way that we're using data and building our data architecture in the organization. And I also contribute with a few other cross-collaborative strategy projects across the organization. Before I was at CMA, I was with the Aspire Group within the sports industry, where I was the director of strategic consulting and research and was able to work with over 70 different brands across the world and how they're interacting and touching data and using that to fuel their marketing and ticketing strategies. For me, when I look at why data is important, I think it's the first place you have to look when you start thinking about what should we do, what should be our next step, and where is our strategy. So it's kind of the core piece of your business. And I think a lot of us today in this conversation is how do you kind of protect that core piece and make it something centralized for everybody to use and act on. I'll throw it to Andrew.
Let me jump in next, Wade.
Pass it around. Absolutely.
All right. Eric Nichols, University of South Carolina, Senior Associate AD, CMO. Been there 12 years, was at Vanderbilt for 10 years prior to that. I think I'm on just because I fit an older demographic, probably. Wade's being kind by inviting me on this esteemed panel. But I think just to add to what Michael said, why data is important to us is because we have a goal and aspiration to have real one-to-one relationships with all of our constituents. And I've been around for 20 plus years, and you used to think of season ticket holders and your fan base as a collection, and then it advanced into a segment, and now we want it to be an individual. And that would be how I'd answer that question.
Awesome. Andrew, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. Andrew Case. If you can't tell by the background, I work for the Florida Gators. I'm the director of CRM and analytics, which basically means that I serve as our lead analyst on a day-to-day basis, oversee the maintenance and kind of day-to-day operation of all of our data sources, and then help out with revenue generation, enhancing the streams that we currently have, and also working to create new ones. To answer your question and to kind of build upon what Michael and Eric said about why is data important, I think the biggest reason for me is because of all of the other options and other realms it can open. Without the presence of data, we tend to lean on our own experiences, and we kind of look at anecdotal experiences or interactions that we've had to answer big questions. So when you have a data set to look at and you can glean insights from, I think that really changes the array of options and the options that you have.
Awesome. Thank you all again for being here. And hopefully for the audience, you get a sense that these three folks represent different levels of the organization, different departments within their organizations, and different industries overall. So we're hoping to bring that kind of mixed perspective. Jumping in here, guys, right? We've entitled the session, Mapping Out the Data Journey. That journey can look very different, right? I think, and based on the conversations we had before this webinar, what has that journey looked like for your organization as a high level, just to give context to the audience? Eric, if you want to kick us off here.
Yeah, I'll tell you how we got to where we are. I cut my teeth in email marketing, so that's been near and dear to me for a long time. So I think we've been somewhat advanced in that space for a while. But moving along, it still is a bit of a struggle getting full buy-in from the department. So we definitely built from the middle bottom up. The catalyst was IMG Learfield Ticket Solutions. We renegotiated with them several years back, and it was important for their success to invest in CRM. So we hitched our wagon to that decision and invested in CRM, which led into the data warehouse. And then we started building some momentum internally by, I know a lot of you are thinking about budgets. Ours was stealing some of operational budgets. We allocated 5 different budgets, just trimming off a little bit to fund this initiative. And that's what's worked for us. I know that it's not the same with the other 2 panelists, but I think it's just to illustrate that it's all different to everyone. But as far as where we stand now, we have, of course, SSB Data Warehouse, where everything feeds into. We have the 3 Ticketmaster databases, which is our primary, secondary, and account manager Arctics. We're making the transition. We're in the 9th inning of Salesforce Marketing Cloud for our email marketing. Salesforce CRM, they all push out to Tableau. And let's see, what am I missing? I believe that is, and we have appended data, and then we manually upload our merch data.
Yeah, I think to kind of build off of what Eric said there, for our approach and kind of the genesis of how we got started really was a little different, just from the standpoint it was more of a top down. We've been very fortunate to have leadership that saw the benefit, and it was ultimately the same goal that Eric mentioned with South Carolina, was to have a one-to-one personal communication plan for our fans, and our administration saw the need and the benefit for that. And fortunately, we were able to come in and say, with these tools, with this software, with this staffing, we can come in and help accomplish those goals that we know have a business benefit for us in the long run. So for us and with our team here, we've tried to focus on keeping a balance between strategy, staffing, software, and support. And knowing that if we keep all four of those items in balance, we're going to operate at maximum efficiency. And so really that's kind of how we got started. And that's been about a three and a half year journey that initially started out with us hiring 2 staff people, myself and Jillian Kirby, who writes all of our emails, handles all of our digital marketing. And that was spearheaded by James Slagle, who's an assistant AD for revenue generation. And so we kind of make up a 3-person team here that is all things data and analytics. And so that, from a software standpoint, that started out with CRM and Eloqua from a marketing automation standpoint, and then expanded and grew over the past couple of years to SSD for a data warehouse solution, and added a mobile app as well. So we kind of try to take things step by step, keep things in balance as we can handle them from a staffing and from a strategy standpoint.
And I think for us at CMA, it goes back to a little bit about where our core business is. And we're a membership organization first. So a lot of people in the sports space, you might equate us to like a USTA that is garnered to progress the game of tennis, but at the same time is putting on events. And so a lot of people think about CMA and they think about our consumer events with awards or the festival. But yet internally, we're looking at how do we manage our members? We have a foundation, we have a partnerships team, we have a typical marketing team that's working on building country fandom and promoting our events. And what we found early on in our data journey was everybody knew they needed some form of a CRM or more formalized data structure, and they were kind of acting independently. And so about 1.5 years ago, we designated a cross-collaborative group to start exploring this. And so that's myself and our IT team and marketing. And we formed a triumvirate to really understand what are the needs within our organization. And we took almost a year just to consult with all the different departments internally, start to explore what they needed, what were their use cases, how would data be used for them on the output, what do they currently have, and where is data being stored within our organization. Quite honestly, we're quite fresh onto this journey. We just signed our scope of work with SSB back in February, and we're working as of today just to stand up our data warehouse and start to get some of our introductory data sources into the system. But through it, it was just about understanding and aligning objectives across a lot of different departments and building more of a team functionality rather than trying to act out just through one department. So our data journey has been kind of long, and we've been very mindful and intentional about teaching and educating everyone in our organization about the why behind this and making sure everybody's kind of singing from the same song sheet.
I think that's helpful context for everyone. And Michael, I'm going to come back to you with a separate question here too, because I think what you all touch upon, I think it's important for the audience to recognize that the journey starts in a lot of different places, right? It does not look the same for every organization. Between the 3 of you, right, 2 of you have specific data tech teams that are working in the weeds on this stuff. And then Eric, when we think about your athletic department, that's a shared kind of responsibility, right, between ticketing, marketing, email teams, and others. Michael, something we talked about, right, is the journey. It doesn't just start with a certain partner, right? It doesn't start with an SSB. It doesn't start with a certain system. So maybe you could speak a little bit more to that of how, this was emulating, right, or coming forth from different parts of your org.
Yeah, I think initially on the onset, we were kind of asking the question, do our staff members really understand what a CRM is or what data should be used for? And so we got together and actually did a 101 session for our whole entire staff about CRM and what data strategies were in place. We took them through what a consumer flow could look like if we built out all of this infrastructure. We looked at case studies from the Minnesota Vikings and other arts communities and how they use data. Because we knew this wasn't going to be something that just kind of popped up overnight. And we wanted to make sure the organization didn't look at it and say, oh, that's just partnerships or that's just marketing. We wanted to really show the value to every single department and that they would have a return on objective. And because of that, I mentioned we're a cross-collaborative group and we operate like such. I have 2 colleagues that I talk to daily on this initiative, and without one of us, this isn't successful. We all have a different viewpoint that we bring to this, whether it's IT-based, digital marketing, and then we report up to a data advisory group, which is our CEO and a few critical department heads, where we meet with them on a monthly basis just to update the process and make sure we're not really looking at anything that's not a priority. So we're constantly making sure our goals are being checked off. And I think that's why we're only 3 months into SSB's formal relationship, and we feel like we're well ahead of schedule because we've had this kind of collaborative nature from the start.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then Andrew, I'm going to come back to you one more time before we leave this section of our conversation. I think, especially in college athletics, right? Folks are thinking about how to build out a data team, right? And what does that look like? We've heard an example from Michael, and obviously the professional sports realm gives us a lot of examples, but you all are building that or trying to build that at Florida. Could you just speak, don't feel like you have to go into too much detail, but what's your vision for some of those positions and how you see those folks interacting? What are they doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, we've got myself, Jillian, who's handling email marketing and digital marketing, a lot of the execution behind that, and James is really kind of the strategy leader. We all contribute that and help to execute that. I think the next level for us is to go to more of the analyst level, and start with, obviously, one analyst would be nice, but eventually a team of analysts that are able to dive in and focus on really any aspect of our business, whether that's ticketing or donations or licensing, or even as granular as simply email marketing, or something of that nature. So that's the ultimate end goal, and kind of where we see probably the next step from a staffing standpoint goes to. But to my earlier point, we're not ready for that until we have the strategy to back that up, and the software, to give them something to do and something to leverage.
Yeah, excellent. So hopefully for the audience, right, that gives you some context of where these guys are speaking from, right? Just from an organizational standpoint in a department. And they've also shared some specifics on tech, right? And we're not necessarily going to get into this call about CRM, warehouse. I don't think that's the terms that you all want to hear and learn. It's more about how does this sometimes a culture shift occur for these organizations. So in that regard, let's move to the middle phase here, where we want some examples, right, and some specifics of what these guys are seeing in their data journey. So we'll start with this question, right? We've talked about you guys are at very different parts of that journey. We saw the poll results come back. Panelists, I don't know if you saw them, but it looks like that applies to our audience as well. What are some of the examples on the plus side of benefits that you've seen to your organization, to your colleagues, as you use data more and more strategically? And it'd be great, if you have examples to throw those out. Michael, I'll point to here first if you want to kick off.
I think even though we're early on kind of putting all of our databases into one place, one of the things we've done really well is just start talking about data first in campaigns. So we're talking more from like truth or some facts rather than anecdotes. And a really good example is just data collection. This is something that most people viewing this are probably already doing, but we noticed some departments were going out and doing data collection campaigns, but we weren't necessarily providing restraints on what should we be capturing and how clean that data was. So we were working with a partner, and we thought we were doing extraordinarily well, getting tens of thousands of leads back every single week. But this data group that we formed, we decided to look at that closely. And we started to understand that really only about 2 to 5% of the leads were clean every single week. So now we're starting to have a better conversation with partnerships and other people inside the organization on how do we make these data collection campaigns better? Are we actually implementing them in the right way? How do we communicate that back with our brand partner so that they're also getting value? And so I think we're trying to take it from looking at just the anecdote of feeling good with like a top line casual number to really understanding what's happening and kind of getting in the weeds to improve our operation.
Eric, I'll keep passing this question around if you want to jump in next.
Sure. I got 5 of them. Don't be intimidated by the 5, but I'll go quickly. I would say our first one is our segmentation of our emails. I think we're really proud about how we are dynamic in our old system, which was Emma, and we will be even more dynamic with Salesforce Marketing Cloud as we make the transition. So that's one. 2 is our CRM is Salesforce. And one of the things we like about Salesforce is its ability to integrate with lots of third-party apps. One of them is DialSource, which is, it's been tremendous for us. I don't want to get into the weeds about what it does, but it basically makes us more efficient. And our sales team saved about an hour per salesperson per day getting through their call list, which was then applied to group sales. And we directly attributed that to at least $100,000 in group sales based on the time saving. So things like that are hard to identify, hard to talk about, but I think that's one that we highlight when asked this question. The ROI of our leads. We do a lot of paid social and getting more precise on who we're targeting and following that lead all the way down the journey so that we can get a close ratio, so that we can turn certain ad channels on and off, certain messages on and off, has been tremendous for us last football campaign. And the last two are Tableau related. One is, this was a really good example of when we have everything organized, we can slice and dice our data in real time and make decisions. There's many times I'd be in a meeting and we'd ask a question and it would be, well, let me get back to you with that report. And it's been a week and you've missed maybe an opportunity. This one was with a certain segment of our football season ticket holders, faculty, staff. There was a question about renewal rates, and that we identified that, oh, this is one segment that's significantly off. What can we do to bring that back up? And it was an actionable insight that we were able to activate on immediately, which there's no way we could have done that before. And then lastly, as we're looking to mobile tickets and this new era with COVID, we had a deep dive into mobile access into our stadium last year, and how many were on the paper ticket, but then how many were mobile, but then breaking down that mobile from an iPhone to an Android, our app to the Ticketmaster app, and then developing some communication campaigns to make sure we can communicate with those that don't know how to utilize the app to enter a stadium more effectively between now and the beginning of the season. So.
Yeah, I would just piggyback, exactly. Michael and Eric's answers there were great and spot on. So I would agree with everything that they said. And to build off a little bit more about what Eric said about being able to track social channels and our advertising we've done there, I think that's had especially over the last year, especially as we've been selling tickets for 2020, to be able to track, back to Google or Facebook and those different avenues and different campaigns we've been running, and be able to track those accurately and efficiently. Being able to do that in a much shorter time than we would have been able to a year ago, and with a much higher degree of certainty, as far as knowing, that person came into our system this way through this campaign and worked with this sales rep and ended up purchasing these season tickets. And knowing that in an automated way that is displayed to our entire organization through Tableau and through our portal has been huge for us. And that was really even kind of going back a step, and when we were building out our data warehouse, that's how we made decisions on what data to add to the warehouse. Is this data source going to make us more accurate and more efficient? And the example I used for that was our Fanatics data. We were doing a manual upload of that, and it was taking a lot of time out of our week and out of the time that we had. So we made the decision to invest in that and add that as an integration to our warehouse, because it was making the data more accurate. We had a better picture of our fans, and it was making us much more efficient to move on to more strategic and less maintenance related items.
Andrew, as you mentioned that, there's some questions coming in from the audience, and thank you all for doing that, right? But we do have someone asking specifically about that social front. So I think you were just touched on it, right? Just in a conceptual, it's important to be able to track that lead from first touch point to conversion. The specific question asked if you would provide any more detail on maybe some tools that you're using, or any other, a bit more detail on how you're doing that, why it's important.
Yeah, for us, we've moved to where virtually all of our season ticket sales efforts are form-based. So we know we're able to, through the back end URLs and tagging and things along on those forms, able to track that form submission back to a sales venue or a conversion venue. And then obviously once we get that form submitted, we can track them via their email address and how they begin to move down the pipeline with our sales reps. So probably not a super high tech answer to that, but it's worked really well for us and allows us to be able to invest in that. Another big thing for benefit we get from that is we're capturing a lot more information. So a lot of our ads link to this form rather than linking to the purchase process. Whereas if someone clicks on that ad, starts the purchase process, and then clicks out of that screen, we have no information on them. We have no data on them. But if they go to this form and fill that out, we at the very least know how to contact them and know they had some level of interest in our product. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot view of that strategy.
No, I think that's great. And there's some other questions. Again, I'm going to weave these in when I think we're headed towards that. So thank you all again for providing those and continue to do so, please. Okay, so just to make sure we're covering everything, right? We've talked about some rosy pieces. It's not all rosy, right? So what are some of the challenges that you all have seen as you use data more and more in the organization and quite honestly change some of your processes up? Andrew, we'll just stay with you if you want to go first on this one.
Sure. For us, I think it's kind of a misnomer or perception out there that people work in data and analytics are very busy and very tied up with technical issues that they're working with all day. And so for us, we've really tried to break down the barriers and be as accessible as we possibly can across the organization. And kind of going back to how we're structured here, since we're not technically part of a ticket office or a marketing department or a development office, we're our own unit. We have the ability to assist across the entire department. So being very approachable, being proactive, and letting people know what data we have. That's an important education piece internally to let people know kind of the menu of options and the things that are at their disposal. So really just trying to do that education process has been a challenge, but it's been one we've really been eager about attacking.
Michael, what if we pass that to you?
I mean, I think to Andrew's point, you really have to work to demystify data in a lot of ways. And it can be kind of a challenge when we're so comfortable talking data or working in the tech space. But you have to change your vernacular and you have to really lean in and educate. I know one of the big challenges that I hear, whether it was when my time at CMA or when I was working with some sport organizations, is this piece of they don't understand what I do, or, I tried this, but they just don't get it. And often the follow-up question is, what have you done to let them understand what you do? Or what have you done to help them and educate them and invite them in? And so often this might be letting the data and IT people kind of sit at the table, understand the strategic direction, let them jump in and say, hey, we have this tool, we can do this, and we can click in. I think that's one of the things we're really trying to work to at CMA is if you involve us on the front end, we're going to make the output significantly better. And it's not necessarily about adding another voice or trying to circumvent what you're doing. It's trying to evolve it. And I think that's really helpful when you think about challenges with data. We don't have to be talking about numbers. We're talking about just the strategic use of it. So that's a big piece for us going forward.
And then Eric?
Yeah, so one of the questions that I get a lot is about ROI and what is the ROI of your data investment? And I always try to flip that because I think that's a really hard question to answer with data. And I'm not trying to be evasive, but it's I flip it and say, well, what was the ROI on that football locker room or that football practice field or the new video board? We know that it's helpful, but it's very difficult to attribute success in one bucket to the why somewhere else. And I think that's the way data is sometimes. As often as I can have tangible examples like the one I shared earlier with DialSource, I make sure to communicate that, but those don't stack on top of each other that easily that often.
So listen, I think that's critical, right? And I'll back this up because there's a question from the audience already, right? How do you convey some of these qualitative results of your efforts to your leadership team, right? And I think that bridges into our next part of the conversation. Let's just stay on the ROI piece for a second, right? It's a challenge I know a lot of folks are in and are facing. How do you do that from the very beginning? How do you do that as you get more and more in the weeds? I think there's a variety of ways that, that each of you in your different organizations talk about that, be it with leadership and colleagues. And I'll let anybody jump in here first who wants to. But what are some of the ways that you try to communicate value internally, right? Or point to some of those wins?
I think one of the things early for us at CMA was when we did our internal audit and realized all these databases were in all these different departments and not everybody knew what was happening. To us, we've just put a simple goal of database size, alignment, and growth. And so we've put a 1 million number out there in terms of growing our fan database. And it's at least something that's a rallying cry that everybody can get on board with. And it's easy to communicate. And I think it's one of the pieces where it's sometimes really challenging to maybe put a direct ROI immediately to how you're building your data architecture. But you can kind of break that down a bit. You're going to be successful if you have more people that you know and you can build those one-on-one relationships like Eric talked about earlier on. But at the same time, I know our CEO and kind of our data advisory group is looking at this from a strategic plan perspective. So how can we grow the percentage of people that listen to country? How can we grow streams? And if we see those numbers rising and we're doing efforts that intensify our marketing efforts, we can tie that back to data architecture, although it might not be direct. It's a nature where that data architecture is an element of success. And I think that's a piece for us where it's more on the return on objectives, being able to see what's happening through strategy and know that data is an element that's leading to it.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that, and really for us, it's two different things. There are certainly campaigns that we've done that have been successful that we couldn't have done without the certain technology that we have. So being able to say, hey, we ran this campaign or we did this automation that we couldn't have done 6, 8, 12 months ago because of where we were at, and it had this return. So that's kind of a very one-to-one example of measuring that ROI. But even bigger for us, and from a philosophy standpoint, we have a goals document that's 5, 6, 7 pages long. Every one of those goals are objective, measurable, and have a timeline. And thought process there is that we couldn't accomplish these or measure these goals as effectively or as efficiently without this investment in technology and staffing. All of those goals have a direct business benefit for the athletic department. And so, as we accomplish those, we're going to see benefit from that in terms of revenue or engagement from our fans. And it's all due to the investment that's been made over the past several years.
And I'll close out this segment just to say that what we've learned that has been successful in communicating it internally is storytelling. I know we've heard that in other verticals, but I'm sure many of you are like us, where we have student workers or temp workers in extremely vital positions, whether it be answering the phone or working game days. But in this example, I'm talking about the phones. And we've had a few instances, more than we'd be comfortable with, where a student worker may not have executed a return phone call or passed along a complaint. So therefore, the donor feels like we don't care. And developing a system and telling the story of this is a real story that happened, and then following it up with, if we put these processes and this software into place, this is how we can continue to have student workers to help, but we can have some backstops to make it more efficient and more accurate to handle that conflict resolution. But storytelling for us has been helpful.
Thank you all for speaking on that, right? And I think on behalf of the webinar, we don't mean to say we have all the answers to that question. So I think our encouragement here too is that this is a conversation that should be going on in our networks at all times, right? I think we see more and more of these kind of sessions and discussions at the conferences of the world that we all go to in the different industries. But hopefully the poll speaks to this as well as the topic today, but we're all working through this, right? Be it on the professional sports side, the professional event side, or college athletics. This is very much an area that is transforming our business while we're in it. So as much as we have these kind of conversations to learn from one another and how we're addressing it, I think the whole industry gets better from that. So we appreciate the audience questions on it, and hopefully that feedback's helpful too. One more question for you as we're kind of in a little bit of specifics, right? Let's talk about what comes next, right? So where are you guys focused right now, in the short term? Where do you see areas of growth as it relates to your data journey? And I'll incorporate, just for perspective here, we did get another question from the audience about COVID-19, right? So however much you want to touch on it, but what are you doing in this world right now to either identify opportunities for engagement, revenue streams, any other piece there? So whatever direction you want to take it, but where are you focused next? Again, whoever wants to jump in here first.
I think that's where the value is as we're doing modeling for if or how much revenue declines this year. All of my models take from advertising and promotions, but I'm okay with that because I can accomplish basically all that I need to accomplish with my one-to-one communications, primarily through email, and of course the sales team. So those tools by themselves can prop up our whole department if I have to cut everything else. Secondly, by having a structured data warehouse, opportunities that present themselves either through campus or alumni, the ease of which there's transition to integrate. For us, IBM is on campus, they have an innovation center, and the fact that they can see all of these inputs already structured, already ready to go, can make that runway very short to implement a new innovative concept.
Yeah, I mean, as far as for us for the COVID-19 piece, I wouldn't have a whole lot more to add, beyond what Eric said, other than just to say that we're there to support, and we're there to make sure that people have the information that they need to make the most educated decision as it relates to whatever the relation becomes this fall. I wish the data would tell us exactly what's going to happen, but unfortunately, it's not quite there yet. But we are there to support it and provide information, as needed and as much as we can.
The COVID piece is kind of a difficult one for CMA, because when we look at it from a membership angle and from our industry, we've taken quite a significant impact in terms of jobs and personnel that are working within country. But I think that's kind of fueled our organization to kind of double down, especially since we're not engaged with our festival at this time of the year, to really explore how we can take our strategic plan and look at it more intentionally over the next couple of years. And our membership team has grown significantly, the amount of engagement they're trying to do via email and webinars and touch points. And so it's been more of kind of what Eric's point is. We've almost increased our one-to-one as much as possible to say we care, we want to listen, and we want to help. And on the data side, we've gotten a lot of success because people have the time to lean in and listen to us and start to pull resources together. So COVID, in some ways, it's been challenging, but we've tried to slow down, really evaluate what we're doing, and kind of right our ship in the best way possible to align with data. We'd love to be in a place like Andrew, where he has a 3 or 4 page document with all these goals, objectives, and a data metric next to it. And we're slowly working that way. And we're trying to take a deep breath right now and get there.
Yeah. Let's stay here for one more second on the higher education piece significantly. Eric and Andrew, I know you both are thinking about and working through some of the connections to campus and fundraising, other parts than just athletics, right? Andrew, if you want to go first, I don't know if you just want to speak to what's your some vision there, where you guys are focused as it relates to bringing in other groups in this journey.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of our next steps and one of the things on the horizon for us. It's how can we leverage our relationships with our alumni association and central development that are mutually beneficial. There's certainly a lot of information, a lot of data that we have that they would love to have to add to their efforts. And certainly they have, even from just a basic contact information database, information that we would love to have as well. So really just trying to work, and it's been an ongoing, effort and an ongoing mission, but it will continue to be because there's a lot to be gained by both sides. So continuing to work on that relationship, continuing to try and break down some of those barriers that I don't think are unique to Florida. I think it's across all of higher ed that people are trying to work out and figure out. So that's certainly a big goal for us moving forward.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than it puts our athletics director in an unbelievably positive position when the campus can come to us and say, hey, you're doing something pretty good over there. Let's get in on that.
I think for any universities on the front end that are exploring this, I think really taking Andrew's kind of creed here of unification, because when I was at Aspire and dealing with a lot of universities, everybody looked at campus and athletics as almost 2 different institutions. Any way that you start on this journey, if you can invite each other in and start to have more collaborative discussions on those data sources, I think you're going to unlock a lot more power behind this, where often you get in a place where you're a Missouri or you're a Power 5 and you're running with data, for instance, and you're trying to now integrate centralized development or integrate emissions data or integrate XYZ, and it becomes more challenging. So if you're on the front end, slow down, take your time, and kind of evaluate both sides.
And Michael, obviously, I think this spirit does apply to professional events and entertainment as well, correct? It's not just the higher ed side, but you all are also trying to position yourself, you yourself, venues, partners in the space, other folks, right, that a rising tide, right, of this data use would raise all boats. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's a fun challenge because we have a large board. We have more board members than staff members at CMA. And they're all, C-level, very respectable industry leaders, artists, songwriters. They cover the whole realm of the industry. And we had to go through board approval through this. And so on the front end, they're starting to go, how does this make sense to grow country? How does this make sense to make our industry kind of have a louder noise? And so before we even made any investment, they were involved kind of pushing us in the right paths. And we took that mindset though early on, Wade. I think we were more of a consultative approach before we kind of fired. We really wanted to make sure we were aiming appropriately. We slowed down and went through all of our departments internally with those same types of questions. And so we're just trying to do that as well, kind of slowly learning the outside of the industry, how they're leveraging data, and how CMA might be a part of that story.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that feedback. Well, good. Okay, rising up here just for the audience, if you're checking, we are exiting phase 2 of our conversation and entering that kind of final phase. So I only have 2, maybe 3 more questions and honestly a topic for our host to discuss here. So if you have a question you're still sitting on, feel free to get those in. We wanted to be efficient and as helpful as we can in our time remaining. But moving to this last piece, right, the advice and lessons learned. There's been some questions from the audience on that already. So I'll try to weave those into the discussion here. But as we've seen from the poll, we've seen, just in our general experience, we're all on different phases of this journey, right? Different levels of expertise, different levels of environment. So what lessons that you have learned would you share with the group? Any advice, best practices, any of those pieces? Eric, we'll start with you here.
Sure. 3 quick things. One is, I would say maximize whatever tools you have already. All of us obviously have a ticket provider. It probably comes with some email communication component. Are you getting the most out of that? Are you reaching its limit? And don't necessarily go down this data path until you've maximized the ceilings of what all you have. For us, it's email. Email is our most important asset that we have in our department relative to this conversation. Secondly is, what was I going to say? I had 3. I know the third one. I was going to end with the third one being, this thing takes time. I'm an impatient person, and this thing it feels like it takes forever sometimes, but give yourself plenty of time for it to come to fruition. But
Michael,
I'll do in a minute.
Yeah, Michael, I think you had similar thoughts there.
Yeah, this is definitely not a quick process. It's a slow marathon race. And I had 3 quick things as well I'll throw up. One is build a we team. It's not an I initiative. So it can't just be one department. It can't just be one individual. You have to have colleagues and a huge support system to get this through. And the reason is point number 2, this is not cheap. It is a massive financial investment. And a lot of times we think about the finances from the tech side. It's going to cost this to build a data warehouse. It's going to cost this to get our CRM licenses. But don't forget that you need to hire staff. You have to have people that are full-time designated as much as possible to this initiative, or it's going to stick in neutral for a long time. That was one of the biggest fallacies I saw when I was out in the consulting side. Is you go to a lot of properties that we got a great CRM, and you start talking about their use, and it's, oh, we don't really know how, but we made this investment and we want to utilize it. And they've kind of put the cart before the horse. So slow down, get the finances. And then the third piece is that you might not have anything today. One of the things you can start doing is just auditing your organization, going around and asking people, what databases do you have? How many leads are in there? How are you using it currently? What would help you? Just build a spreadsheet. And now at least your organization can refer to that and start to build campaigns or to build some initial tactics on some of that simple data.
Yeah, I would echo loudly what Eric and Michael both said about bringing other people in your organization in as early as possible and giving them that investment and buy-in in what you're trying to accomplish as an overall goal. But what I would add to that and what they've said is don't be afraid to fail. Certainly there's a lot of investment that comes in with this, and as you access more data, as you analyze it, there's gonna be a lot of great ideas that pop up. Some of those great ideas may actually end up being great ideas when you implement them. And that's certainly been the case for us. I mean, we actually jokingly keep a not top 10 list of things that we've tried and didn't exactly turn out how we thought they would. So don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to kind of laugh at yourself whenever you do fail, because you'll end up learning a lot from those experiences. And you'll know either how to tweak that or to completely throw it in the trash. So don't be afraid to fail.
I'm super jealous of Michael and Andrew with the leadership of their departments that make data a priority from the top. For us, having to push up from the middle and bottom, my second point that I forgot was, when you do have a champion, whether it's a department or a person, let that be the lead horse. So some of our schools in the SEC, it was the survey data. Michael Thompson at Ole Miss, that was the catalyst to get things going, and they rode that until they could add more elements to their data structure. For us, it was CRM. But I think find momentum and then ride the momentum wherever it can take you.
Related to that point, right, I'm going to offer some feedback here. I know I'm the host, but just from my seat,
You can't speak.
I
You just
know,
ask questions.
no opinions, but what we do hear a lot of folks talk about is that same thing Eric said, right? This is not an overnight transition. We talk a lot about crawling, then walking, then running. Wherever you could find that piece of momentum, I think what you're hearing from our panelists is that's where you start. That's where you can find value. Over time, we can prove the value for resources needed. But that's I think that's key in that, right? And I think you're also hearing all these folks say, don't go it alone, right? Be it with partners, both third party, but also partners in your network, right? I think these three are representative of, what could be 50 people on this call, right? Who are all working through this either from the professional sports and event standpoint or in the collegiate athletics or higher education standpoint. We have these networks that we should take advantage of. The people want more on this topic. I'm looking at some questions. So let me give you guys two more to throw out, and you guys can jump on one or the other or whatever makes sense. We had one question that said, do you have any best practices, right, when it comes to interdepartmental collaboration? And I think that can apply both to the professional side as well as collegiate. But like specifically, they were thinking marketing and sales. How do you create synergy when using all of these tools together? How do you get people aligned? And then the other question I'll throw out, just from a tech standpoint, right? If you were choosing one tool or one starting point, one partner, whatever it is, where would you begin? I promise that's not an SSB plant question, and I would encourage you not to say, I encourage you to share what you think is the truth there. So where would you begin, and any best practices on sharing?
I'll start real quick. Since ours started in the sales and marketing side of things, it's really myself, and then we have what I would call a unicorn in our staff, Dan Stahl, who is a general manager of outbound sales, but then he's also our de facto data analyst. He's not a data analyst, but he serves as one. But I think when you're pushing up and out from the middle, it's difficult to get buy-in when there's no proof, because it's a long process. And when you start showing some results that are maybe 90% done, but they're slightly not as good as maybe some other tools that you have, that can set you back a couple of steps. So I think it's important to get buy-in, but it's important to get partners. But I think it's even more important to have partners that are bought into the process. I think if they're coming in with a questionable attitude, it's best to wait and let's let the champions run with it to get it into a useful tool that can make the department better. Hope that made sense. The second question was, as I've said a couple of times, email is to me the most important tool that there is.
Yeah, I would, to add to what Eric said, I don't know that I would so much say a particular system as I would people to maximize the systems that you have already. Really agree with what Eric said earlier. Maximize your ticketing system. If that has an email component to that, hire the people that can bring in the people that have that expertise to fully maximize that system. But if I had to answer, a specific system to invest in first, I think an email, marketing automation platform is invaluable. And it was for us at the very beginning to really take us, I feel like we skipped a couple of steps on the journey because we had Eloqua, and it's been a great tool for us. And that probably led to us moving along faster and getting to the point where we needed a data warehouse a lot faster. Because we were able to leverage that tool. As far as the interdepartmental communication, something that we did at the beginning of this journey is we had lunch and learns. We brought in people from across our entire organization to just go through and say, hey, here's some of the stuff that we're doing, some of the stuff we're testing out, whether it's a email drip campaign or a marketing automation or social media advertising, and said, here's what we did, here's the results we got. You can apply that to your specific areas, whether you work with volleyball or gymnastics or softball or what have you. We can replicate these efforts for your area as well.
I think from the synergy piece, especially focusing on the marketing and sales piece, I think you got to think critically about how open meetings are and making sure that the leadership of both the marketing and the sales team are actually setting up times. I would recommend at least weekly, and then probably monthly with both of the full staffs, where you're letting kind of the data lead those journeys on the tactics side. So if you have Tableau dashboards, using that on the front end of these meetings to walk through and to show the results. And I think once people see how it's being used on a day in and day out basis, everybody's going to start buying in. But often we have a marketing team that's putting a lot of effort into social and messaging and communication, and we have a sales team that wants to get hoorah and make 100 calls a day and make sure they're closing deals. And sometimes they're acting independently with the same goal. And so as much as you can do to bring them together, have open invites that are optional, let marketing sit in on sales team meetings so they know what tactics and what training's happening, and do the same thing on the marketing side. I think that would be extremely beneficial. From a tool piece, leveraging email, leveraging ticketing, obvious wins for most people on this call, but I would encourage a lot of people just to look at like Zapier and like little automation tools that can help take forms and push them to certain places that you work currently. So it's kind of a little bit of Eric's maximizing what you have. If you're using FormStack and you have to export CSV files and you're trying to figure out how to upload it to your email, you might be able to create a Zap through Zapier to take your FormStack form, put in an email, or to look at your different programs and give you some automation. And it's fairly cheap. So that's one thing you can just kind of get some hands-on training and start to do something today.
Excellent. And thank you again to the audience for these great questions. At this point, I think we're wrapping up the end of this conversation. I'll pause quickly. Michael, Andrew, Eric, any other piece, any other parting shot that you want to harp on any piece of the conversation before we wrap up here, whoever wants to jump in.
I don't have anything that hasn't been covered already.
Yeah, same here. Enjoy the conversation.
Excellent.
Just to stress to the audience, I think I can speak for Michael and Andrew. If you have specific questions that you didn't want to ask, feel free to reach out to us. We don't have all the answers, but we can tell you why we made what decision we made, and maybe collectively we can get better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Eric. And I would just recommend for everybody, don't get frustrated. This is a really challenging process, and it's really easy to kind of feel like you're on your island or you're frustrated because other people aren't moving as quick. But look at that as an opportunity. Figure out why it's not doing that and get people inside your group. And maybe it might be worth taking 3 to 6 months to really make sure your strategy's firm before any investment happens. And that's okay. At least you're making a step forward. So kind of concentrate on baby steps. Don't get frustrated, and feel free to reach out to any of us.
Well, on behalf of all of us, then, thank you to each of our panelists, right? We appreciate the insight and the time, and also making yourself available for the future. Thanks to our audience. At this point, we'll conclude the webinar. You will get a recording of this sent to you. Feel free to share with others, and we hope we see you on a future discussion. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.